for all to step in. As we jump back into Mark, we're in Mark 8. Jesus has been traveling to Tyre and Sidon, where he met a Syrophoenician lady who was a Gentile, and he saw great faith in her. And then he's returning back now to Decapolis, where we picked up last week, to an area of the Gentiles. Decapolis was where Jesus sent the man that was set free of the legion of demons to go back to his home and to tell all that God had done for him. And so he had done that, and now there's a crowd of people that have heard about Jesus. Jesus has just healed a deaf mute, and now the crowds are gathering. And so we pick up in Mark 8 with the crowd in the Decapolis area and what Jesus is going to do and feel for them. So in Mark 8, starting in verse 1, it says, "In those days, when again a great crowd gathered, they had nothing to eat. And so he called his disciples to him and said to them, 'I have compassion on the crowd, because they have been with me now 3 days and have nothing to eat. And if I send them away hungry to their homes, they will faint on the way. And some of them have come from a far way.' And his disciples answered him, 'How can one feed these people with bread here in this desolate place?' And he asked them, 'How many loaves do you have?' And they said, 7. And he directed the crowd to sit down on the ground. He took the 7 loaves, and having given thanks, he broke them and gave them to his disciples to set before the people. And they set them before the crowd. And they had a few small fish, and having blessed them, he said that these also should be set before them. And they ate and were satisfied, and they took up the broken pieces left over, 7 baskets full, and there were about 4,000 people, and he sent them away." And so we got this kind of a reenactment of what we'd already talked about with a Jewish crowd of 5,000. And that crowd had only been with Jesus one day, and Jesus had compassion on their hunger. But now this crowd has been with him for 3 days, and he's like, we can't send these people away. And so he had compassion on their heartfelt needs. And that word compassion is the same that he had for that 5,000 crowd. He felt deeply in his heart to have compassion and pity for them, because he's like, I just can't send them away hungry. They've been with us 3 days, and some people have come from far away. And this is Jesus' frequent attitude as he looks upon crowds, as he looks upon individuals, is this compassion for us, that his heart goes out to us. And so whatever we bring in this morning, Jesus knows exactly where we're at, and he has compassion on that. And sometimes we think Jesus looks down on like maybe fear or doubt or uncertainty, and that's just not how he interacts with us. He has compassion on those things, and he addresses them. And so as he looks at the crowd and addresses their need, he looks at the disciples again, and he's like, hey, how are we going to feed these guys? And you would think that they would be like, well, the way you did it last time. But they immediately jump to, we ain't got nothing. Like, we can't do this. And they looked at what they didn't have instead of what they did have. Because last time when Jesus said basically the same thing, well, what do you have? And they're like, well, we got some fish and some loaves. And this time he says, what do you have? And they're like, well, we got 7 loaves. Now, it's interesting that eventually some fish made it out of the bag too, right? Because that's like, some people were like, well, we do have a couple of fish. And we would think, well, we missed the boat on that. But, the bottom line is whenever and however we get to the end of ourselves to say, well, I do have this, it's not too late. It's not like, well, you missed your opportunity to bring it to me to bless and to break and distribute. Jesus is like, oh, you found some fish? Bring it. And so whenever we immediately address that and hand it to him or surrender it to him, or whether we hold on a little bit more and we see what Jesus is doing, we're like, oh, he can do that? Maybe I should give him this too, right? He's like, yeah, just bring it to me. What do you have? And I can do that. And so he feeds this crowd just like he fed the crowd of 5,000. And they collect this time 7 baskets. All right. Well, last time, how many did they collect? They collected 12, right? Jesus is trying to illustrate something to the apostles at that point. Now they're collecting 7 baskets. But when the apostles collected the 12 baskets, they were like these little baskets. That was the Greek word used for basket. Now, you guys do laundry, clothes hampers. That's what this basket is. This is kind of like an overwhelming big hamper that they're collecting all these leftovers. And you can just imagine them going, what are we going to do with all these leftovers, right? And why only 7? Why not 12? And so Jesus is using these little details in their lives to kind of bring them into the situation, the scenario. And the significance of what he's doing in Decapolis is he's doing the same exact thing with the Gentiles that he had done to the Jews of the 5,000. So the 5,000 crowd was Jewish. And what did they want to do after he fed them? They want to make him king, right? By force, they're going to make him king to feed them daily. Now, the Gentiles, he feeds them, and there's no mention of that. They're just kind of like, who is this guy? And Jesus is offering himself as the bread of life now to the Gentiles, just like he's offering himself to Israel, the Jews. And he had been traveling up to Tyre and Sidon, right? And had that interaction with the woman. And she's like, yeah, but even like little dogs get the scraps of the kids' table. Now Jesus is reaching directly out to the Gentiles and offering himself as the bread of life. So there's a shift now in the ministry that he's performing. And he had just healed a guy in the Decapolis that was mute and deaf. And so he's showing that this word of God, this bread of life, this himself, is being offered now to the Gentiles too. And that's the mystery that the apostles are supposed to get, right? And they're probably not getting it, and we still struggle with this sometimes. The mystery of the gospel is it's for Jews and Greeks. It's for Jews and Gentiles. It's for slaves and free. It's for men and women. It's for every culture, every race, every creed, every tribe, every tongue. And it wasn't like a shift in what God's plan was, because when God called Abraham in Genesis 12, he said, now the Lord said to Abram, go from your country to your kindred and your father's house to the land I will show you, and I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse. In you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. And so as Abraham was called to begin this Jewish nation, the whole reason of the establishment of Israel was to bless all the nations. And so this Abrahamic covenant that God blessed, it was to call Israel to be a nation, but it was to bless then all the Gentiles and to be a forerunner to what the Messiah would do, which is what Jesus is now doing publicly and openly. I am offering myself as the Messiah to even Gentiles. This was fulfilled in Isaiah 49:6. He says, "Is it too light a thing that you should be my servant to raise up the tribes of Jacob and bring back the preserved of Israel?" He's speaking to Israel as a nation. "I will make you a light for the nations, that my salvation may reach to the ends of the earth." And Isaiah's prophesying to Israel, through you, the Messiah will come to be a blessing, to be a light, and to be a salvation to reach the ends of the earth. And now Jesus is on site, and he's offering himself to the Gentiles to be just that, salvation to the end of the earth. And then this all happens, and then it says in verse 10, immediately he got into the boat with his disciples and went to the district of Dalmanutha, which is Magdala. So just like when he fed the 5,000 on the Sea of Galilee, on the shores of Galilee, and jumped into the boat, he sent the disciples on, and he went up to the mountain to pray. Now they all jump right back in a boat, and they're heading over to the other side. In verse 11, the Pharisees came and began to argue with him, seeking from him a sign from heaven to test him. And he sighed deeply in his spirit and said, "Why does this generation seek a sign? Truly I say to you, no sign will be given to this generation." And he left them, got into the boat again, and went to the other side. And so on this side of the sea, on the shore, it's a quick interaction, right? The scribes and Pharisees came from a long way. They met him, and now they just want to argue, saying, "Hey, we want you to give us a sign." And they demanded it. All right, it's one thing to seek a sign from God. It's like, "God, I just want you to speak into this and give me an experience, give me a peace, give me a sign that I'm on the right track or a decision I need to make." It's one thing to ask for a sign. It's a whole nother thing to demand a sign. And that's what these guys are doing. They're like, "No, you need to do this for us right now so that we can make a decision." Unfortunately, they had already made a decision. And so as they brought this demand to him, really it was not to explore, it was to argue. Now, he had done how many different signs, how many different wonders, how many different miracles, right, to accompany his teaching. And as he spoke the word, he lived out the word. He was the word in action. And he also performed miracles in people's lives because of not just to prove who he was, but because he had compassion for them. He didn't just be like, well, I'm going to show you who I am by healing you. His heart went out to them. And in their need, in their heartfelt need, and their unmet needs, Jesus would interact with them and perform miracles because of his love for them. And so these guys kind of demand this sign that's like once and for all, if you just do this, we'll believe, which Jesus knew their hearts and knew that wasn't true. And the crazy thing is, Jesus at this point could have done any miracle he chose to do, right? He could have chose to bring in a legion of angels to praise his name. He could have brought fire and brimstone down to surround them and get their attention. He could have caused the sun to stand still. But he didn't do any of that, right? He basically dismissed them, but with a heart for them. His response was grief and disappointment. And this sighed deeply, this deep groan that he showed, knew that he was in a spiritual battle. He's like, it's not flesh and blood, it's not these guys, right? But they've developed a system of religion where he then called him out before that to say that you're following your father, the devil, and you're stuck in that. And now you're demanding me something that I'm just not going to do. And instead of them seeing the Messiah that was standing right before them, they just made this demand for a sign from heaven. And so the truth is, if Jesus had given them a sign, he had already given them hundreds of signs, it wouldn't have been enough. You know, some of them did get it, though. In John 3:2, it says, a man came to Jesus by night, Nicodemus. He said, Rabbi, we know that you are a teacher come from God, for no one can do these signs that you do unless God is with him. And so they had been exposed to them, right? And like Nicodemus, he caught on to this, and he's like, only a guy from God can do what Jesus is doing. It's kind of like when the blind man was healed, and he's like, well, I don't know if he's from God or not, but only God can perform miracles, so I'm putting my stock in the fact that he is from God. Luke 11:20 says, but if by the finger of God I cast out demons, then the kingdom of God has come upon you. And so Jesus is addressing the religious leaders there and saying, look, you just watched me cast out demons. The finger of God, the presence of God, the God in your midst is here. And I've just shifted my ministry to reach out to the Gentiles, and that should have been another sign for them. Like they knew that the Messiah was coming to be a light and a salvation to the ends of the earth, to the Gentiles. And as soon as Jesus moved his attention from Israel to the Gentiles, that should have been another sign they picked up on, because they should have known the scriptures and go, oh, wait, he's not just here for Israel, he's here for the whole world. That's a sign of Messiah. God is in our midst. And so as Jesus offered himself as a bread of life to the Gentiles, they should have picked up on that. And it's neat how he continues to offer himself to the whole world. To what I thought about this last couple of weeks was subcultures, right? A subculture is a culture within a culture. And so we have a lot of cultures around us. We have a beach culture. We have a church culture. We have a work culture. Hopefully that's good. There's a school culture. There's a lot of cultures that are developed. There's a culture at our home that is developed. And so we got the privilege of being exposed to a subculture called the Appalachian Trail this last couple of weeks. It's a different culture. It's a different lifestyle. And it was interesting as I was exposed to that. You know, Beth goes, well, what was one of the biggest spiritual insights you got? And I'm like, you know, the truth of it, like one of the biggest things I got was God can speak anywhere and everywhere. Like as I was on the trail, like we had moments, all kinds of moments, but we had moments of like a spiritual experience, right? But I don't have to be on the trail to have a spiritual experience. That was like my revelation of, I have spiritual experiences all over the place, like at my desk, in my office, at home, at the gathering place, at the rec center, in a coffee shop. Like the cool thing about God is he's not like, well, you got to go to this specific place to have an experience with me. But the difference is God's everywhere, but am I aware of his presence everywhere, right? We get into certain subcultures, and we're not so so aware of his presence in that subculture. Like maybe work, right? Well, I got to go do my job. Well, God's right there too. I got to go to school and get my grades. God's right there too. So the trail kind of revealed to me, like, it's not where you are, it's your awareness and your presence of where he is, right? And he is everywhere you go. Am I aware of that? Now, I knew that, right? But it's way more easy to experience that and to get that revelation when you're a little bit more dependent on him. And sometimes we were dependent on him for the next step, the next water source, the next meal. And we saw God provide in some crazy ways. It was sweet. Crazy ways that we don't see him provide when our normal routine because we're just doing our thing, right? And I know where to go get a sandwich at my house. I know how to turn on a faucet and get some water, right? But on the trail, those things aren't so much available. And so the very first day out the box, because I didn't do the due diligence of losing 15 pounds before I hit the trail, my knees are like, what are you doing, bro? Right? And my left knee just exploded into like a big old ball. And I'm like, oh, this is not good, right? I should have lost that weight. But we got word back, right? And people were praying. And it was neat. It was like my knee is like ebbing and flowing with the prayers of the people and me listening to my body also, right? But it's like one day it would be a balloon. The next day I wouldn't even know there's an issue. And it was neat to see God use the prayers of the people to go, you know what? Even in our physical body, like I'm just reliant on God to take the next step of whether I need to get off trail or whether I need to continue to go. And so it was neat. The third week, I ran into a kid. He's a kid. He's 30 years old. Who was experiencing the same thing on trail. And he had come off trail to go to the hospital to rest his knee. And I'm like, dude, I've been dealing with that for 3 weeks. And he goes, well, what have you done? And I'm like, I've had a lot of people praying for me. And he's like, well, would you pray for me? Yeah, that'd be awesome, right? And so shout out to Jonathan and hope you're back on your trail with your brother Benjamin. He's like, I'm going to tune in. I'm going to check you guys out. But it was neat to experience people that are going through the same thing, but then to go, well, I don't have that. Can you be that for me? And I'm like, yeah, I can actually tell my church, pray for Jonathan's knee, because he's going the next week. He wants to be on trail, and he's been sitting out the last couple days. And then one night, we did a long hike to get to a water source, and right before we got to the end of the trail, I took a slip off a timber and came down on my back and tweaked it, and I'm like, oh, so close. Like I was literally 50 yards from the finish line, and I wiped out and tweaked my back. And so we get to the bottom of the hill. Rick goes and gets some water. Me and Steve are kind of sitting there looking pitiful, and these two guys come off trail, and they're like, are you guys okay? Like, we looked pitiful, and we're just like, yeah, we will be. That was Steve's like, we will be okay. Right now, not so much. And the guy goes, can we get anything for you? And Steve's like, well, you know, we're getting some muddy water, but if you got some fresh water, that'd be cool. And the guy's like, I think I got a couple of bottles in my truck if you want to walk up there with me. And so I walked up there with him. He goes, oh, man, I forgot they're frozen. And I'm like, ice? Hurt back? Awesome. So for the next half hour, I just had 2 like water bottles on my back. And within a half hour, like I was good to go. And that guy's apologized, and all I got is ice. And I'm just like, take it. I'll take it. And God's like, I got you. Even in the crazy falls, right? And then one day we come off trail, and there's this dude set up with his van and a tarp. And he's got all this food and fruit and nice, like, just invite. And we call them, they're called trail angels, right? And they provide trail magic. I won't get into that. It's food. It's water. So he's got 3 chairs set up. Me, Rick, and Steve come, and we fill up the 3 chairs. We grab a bottle of water. We start talking to Preacher Dave. And we spent a couple hours with him. And while we're there, it was probably the only time we were on trail hiking during the day that it rained. And it was like a monsoon for like an hour. But he had a tarp set up, and all our junk was dry, and we were dry. And the rain passed, and we're like, guess we'll keep going. And he says, you know what? God had you guys here. And it rained so we could spend time together. Because he was a lonely dude, right? But he was doing it out of his heart for Jesus. And so it was neat to see, like, he met our needs of keeping us dry and giving us goodies, and we met a need for him to have, like, Christian fellowship and brotherhood in that. And then it was neat that we literally got water out of rocks a lot, right? It wasn't supernatural, but a lot of water comes out of rocks in the thing, and then there's just these moss things, and they drip off, and you get the water, or you put leaves up in the rock, and water comes out. And it was kind of like, man, God actually is providing for us water out of rock, which is so cool. And we get to camp one night, and a guy happens upon us, and he sees my knee, and he's like, dude, I've got an extra knee brace. Do you want that? I'm like, yeah, I'll try it, right? He was a big dude. And so when I put it on, I'm like, well, it actually isn't compressing anything. It's just kind of sitting there. So I'm not going to take your knee brace, but thanks. But it was just God going, you know what? I see what's going on here. And even this complete stranger that we had spent maybe 5 minutes with, was willing to offer me his knee brace. And I'm like, well, what about you? And he's like, oh, I'm good. And I'm like, you know what? You keep your knee brace. I'm good. But just a reminder from God, I see what's going on. And one day we got off the trail. We're waiting for a shuttle, and we come off the top of the mountain. We come down to the gap, and a guy's getting some water collecting from one of the runoffs. And he goes, this water is better than our city water, so I come out here to get fresh water and then take it back to my house to use. And then he just starts, like, blessing God 1,000 different ways. He told us, like, all these times God has moved in his family, moved in his life, moved in his grandkids, miracles that had happened. And we just spent like an hour, maybe 45 minutes, praising God, just him telling testimony after testimony after testimony. And then he's like, can I give you a track that my grandpa wrote? And we're like, yeah, that'd be really cool. And so we got this little track from Reverend Thornton, who wrote generations ago. He just wrote this gospel track, and he goes, I just hang out here, and I just kind of pass out tracks when God gives me the opportunity, and I just want to praise God for all he's done for us. And it was just a really sweet time to see God bringing people into our path to encourage us, when that's what we try to do a lot of times, right? We try to live our life to be an encouragement to other people, and then God just like continually put people in our path to encourage us along the way. And so we met a ton of awesome folks on the trail and in the hostels, and just a lot of people out on trail were looking for this experience that Jesus is talking about. Like they're getting away, they're in a crossroads, or they've gone through something crazy. They're just looking for like a touch or a reality of who God is. And Jesus said, I'm it. I'm what you're looking for. Like, and I can bring that experience a billion different ways, but at the end of the day, it's not about the sunrise or the sunset or the beauty of God's creation. It's about Jesus saying, I'm that experience, right? I'm that sign. We got to be willing to be open to that, because sometimes we put like parameters on how we want God to speak to us through this experience or through this confirmation or through this sign. And Jesus just simply says, I'm it. I'm the way, the truth, and the life. There's no way to get to the Father or get to the experience that you're seeking apart from me. And then he told the Pharisees, not in Mark, right, but in Matthew and I think it's Luke, he went on to expand. He goes, well, I'm not going to give you a sign, but I am going to give you a sign. And that sign is my resurrection. That sign is myself. I'm the resurrection and the life, which he said to Mary and Martha, and then he rose Lazarus from the dead. And the apostles in the early church, that was like their message as they would proclaim the good news. Now, our good news in the Western church is God loves you and has a plan for your life, which is a true gospel good news message, right? But the basis of the early church's message was he's risen. He's alive. He was dead. He was buried, but now God raised him back to life. And so the resurrection was the good news of the early church as they would share who Jesus was, because no one had ever done that. And as I shared a couple times on trail, like no one has ever risen from the dead. And we have to get to a place of that is a step of faith to believe that he rose from the dead. But the truth is, it's historically documented. It's like not a huge leap of faith to go,